Welcome everyone to a very, very special episode of Legends and Lectures, and I'm joined by longtime friend and fellow nerd, Nick from Epic Realms. Yeah.
Yay! Hi there.
Nick,
How are you? Thank you for asking me to join. I've been waiting.
yes.
I've been
How many
waiting.
times have I been on Epic Realms? Like four times, I think.
It depends on what we're talking about. Are we talking about the podcast? Are we talking about the off the pod show? Or are we talking about just like, gaming chat? A lot, a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
We've done all kinds of stuff
That's
together.
true. Nick is here because I asked him very specifically to be here to talk about the history of TTRPGs, which are.
Tabletop role-playing games.
Yes, and so we're very thematic today. For those who are listening, I'm wearing my D20 dress, and I have a very plushy D20 next to Fuji-san. And Nick has his very lovely, fancy, gorgeous fantasy background that he always has on Epic Realms. So,
Yeah,
Nick,
it's
will you
fine.
please tell everybody, for those who don't know, what is Epic Realms?
Epic Realms is all kinds of stuff, but mainly it's a podcast where we interview game designers, authors, writers, TV personalities, musicians, but usually more around the nerd-based culture. So a lot of authors, a lot of game designers, a lot of writers, stuff of that nature. But we get all kinds of people on if it's geek related and you're somebody that's pretty well known out there like Michelle is, we'll have you on the show and be like, hey, let's talk about stuff and have fun.
So we talked about, I think the first time I was on your show, we talked about Viking stuff because we were talking about
Fate of the
uh,
Norns.
yeah, that's right. We're talking about Fate of the Norns, which is here. We're talking about this book, which is Mindle's first excursion into into the world of Viking Ireland. And then we talked about werewolves, we talked about cryptids, monsters. We did that whole thing with cryptids and monsters, I
Yeah,
remember.
I think that was the off the pod show. We did the cryptids.
Yeah.
We talked about cheese one time.
Yes, yes, that's right. We did not talk about the history of cheese, but we talked about the fact that Nick was wrong with regard to what kind of cheese is
Oh,
acceptable. Just like in the other show that we do, which is RKO Scoop, which I do with my friend Mark. We were talking about, we actually talked about prehistoric potatoes because there were 10,000-year-old potatoes that are about pearl shaped that were discovered in parts of Southern America. And he asked me what my favorite, potato form was, and we talked about potatoes. And
I
then
wish I would have been there for that.
I know, and I feel like this would have been amazing for you. But then he said to me, he asked me about my favorite crisp or chips, if you're in the States, and I said, oh, that they're a specific Taiwanese brand that actually has like salted egg yolk as their like flavoring, and
Okay.
they're really amazing. And they really just can't, like, the crunch on that potato is so much better than all North American crisps. And so we asked about potatoes, and then we talked a little bit about like which ones were flavored first. There's a debate over whether America or Ireland has the first flavored crisps. Did you know this?
Oh, no, I
So
didn't.
there's a
I
debate
just eat
over
them. I don't.
there is a debate over whether Tayto, the Irish crisp company, created whether cheese and onion was the first flavor, or whether there was a company in the States that actually had barbecue as their first flavor, and they were both
Oh,
invented in the same year. So
okay.
there's a very long-standing big war about this. And Mark said, "Oh, but he was about to say his favorite crisp, which he was talking about chocolate vinegar." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. You, sir, who live in the land of throws vinegar on everything, are not allowed to have an opinion on the potato wars. Don't talk to me about vinegar on potatoes. Goodbye." And that was the end of that conversation. We were actually running overtime for RKO
Oh,
Scoop, and I just ended it on
okay.
that. And that was that. So this is the kind of stuff that we do. But today we're here. I invited Nick very specifically to talk about the history of TTRPGs because both Nick and I are rampant TTRPG enjoyers. Nick, what was your first TTRPG? Before we get into the history of TTRPGs, what was your first one, or the one that you remember?
I would love to say it's D&D, but it's not. It's a game called GURPS.
Oh, GURPS,
GURPS,
classic,
generic universal role-playing system,
classic.
and then we led into AD&D. I was in the era of the Satanic Panic, so being able to play D&D was not allowed. I had to do it secretly until my mom realized that it was a little bit different, than what she thought it was. We weren't going to kill each other with swords and, whatnot. So that D&D wasn't allowed, but we played GURPS starting out, and my mom had no idea what that was or what that was, and I neither did I. So there we go.
That's great. I remember, so one of the ones I do remember playing, or at least being part of a D&D 2.0 game, because I remember THAC0, again, which we'll
Yeah,
get into in a second.
yeah,
But
for
I
sure.
think, but I was just kind of there as an observer. I don't really remember participating in the game. One of the first ones that I actively participated in was Rifts. Do you remember what Rifts is?
Yes, yep,
Yeah,
I remember
Palladium.
Rifts. Yeah.
Yeah. With all their SDC and MDC mega damage
Hmm.
characters, and how you could never have a universe where the two of them met because one of them would just flick the other one away, and that was it. And so we had Rifts was like the first major campaign that I did because I was in university with somebody who had literally all the books from the OG times,
I
and
remember when I first
yeah.
heard about Rifts, and I was like, "Oh, Riff!" So it's like a generic version of GURPS. Was my first thought. Yeah, because it's GURPS and then there's a Rifts. It's like, come on, come up with something unique. And yeah,
With this kind of it, right? So
right.
that was what I would remember as my first real experience because obviously I did play D&D. I remember the 2.0, I remember 3.0, but 3.5 was my real big experience with D&D, and I had
Okay.
all those books and I still
Yeah.
do somewhere. I have a bunch of them, but that was like the big one for me where I was actually more excited about collecting the books and learning the lore that I
Right.
was actually playing the game because I had so few people to play with in them days.
Yeah.
And I actually got more into it because of computer RPGs because that was the solo experience, and that's really
Yeah.
what I could do. We are going to talk about some original solo TTRPGs too. But before we
Yeah,
do
for
that,
sure.
let's talk about the three elephants in the room. And that is, we're not going to go too much into these things, but that's board games,
Yes.
wargaming, and historical reenactment, or what we
Yeah.
now think of as like LARPs. Okay, so
Yeah.
board games. Nick, what do you think was the first board game?
Oh, that one. God, I'm not prepared for that. I'm not sure. I couldn't even hazard a guess as to what it was. It's, like backgammon maybe, or like,
Okay. That backgammon's old, but not that
checkers,
old.
something along the little, the old something that was way, way back, probably
I
something that I don't know about, Chinese
Nick
checkers
didn't
or
know I was
something.
going to ask this, but I just want to get this out of the way because I could feel, all the nerds, especially me, and they're going, but what about board games? And yes, obviously we have to talk a little bit about board games. So there's a debate as to which one is oldest. But the one that we have the most of is the Royal Game of Ur, and that's from ancient Mesopotamia. That's the oldest that we have in full.
Okay.
We know how to play. But the oldest discovered gaming pieces are actually from Turkey. And it's a set of sculptures. It's like four design sets of sculpture in a chess-like game that were created sometime in the Bronze Age, 5,000 years ago. But we don't know what this game was. We don't have a board. We don't have rules. We just have the pieces. So that's all we have until we know more about it. The two of the other oldest are Senet and Mehen, or Mehen, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Both of them from Egypt, both of them quite old, from somewhere around 3000 BCE.
I
Another,
remember hearing about Senate. I
yeah,
remember learning about that somewhere in the vast regions of the back of my skull.
and
It's like, that
it's
sounds
still
like,
around.
yeah,
Yeah. We say so Senet is it comes in a long box and it has the board on the top and the pieces go inside. It really looks like a modern travel gaming board. And
yeah.
that's kind of what it was. And Mihen or Mehen is the one that looks like sorry. It's a snail shell shape. And
Okay.
you take the pieces and you go around in a circle and you get to the center. And Mihen especially, both Senet and Mihen or Mehen were around for a very long time. It was around until the Romans, and they just kind of fell out of favor after the Romans left the Egyptian region. But we still have them, and they're still around. Chaturanga or Chaturanga from India, and that's where we get chess from. And that's also one of the earliest games. There's
That's
also
the oldest one I've played.
Chaturanga. Nice, nice. There's also
By way of chess.
there's also Knucklebones, Nine-Man Morris, which I hate to death. Mancala, obviously, in terms of Southern African games. Snakes and Ladders, again, India. Well, these are all games that are really, really old that we have. And so, yes, we mention this because this, obviously, the pieces contributes to
Right. Yes.
what, because obviously
What
we
we're
have
going to
dice.
talk.
We have a D20 from from the Mediterranean that is extremely old. And if you look at it, again, you look at it and you think, this is amazing. It looks brand new. You can play with it. So these kinds of dice games or board games or playing on a tabletop have literally been around since antiquity.
Yeah.
And Mark and I were talking today in our Scoop saying that people think that play or like the history of play or the history of games that children didn't play games or that it was only for adults. No, I mean, everybody played, everybody did these things. There was no Milton Bradley to tell you that
Right,
no,
right.
you can't play this game because you're 99 years old. You can't play. That was not a thing. The other thing, of course, this we mentioned board games because this contributes to things like wargaming. Nick, do
Yeah,
you want to?
you can't
Yeah,
have wargaming games without the board games, and you can't have wargaming games. You can't have D&D or
right,
tabletop role playing games without war games at all.
right, exactly, exactly. So, do you want to guess where the first war games came from?
No, I don't want to guess. I don't want to. I know a lot of militaries use
Yes,
them
yes.
specifically for planning, right? You do that and you teach your kids how to plan for war and battle. But where, my knowledge of history doesn't go back much for my halfway decent commoner knowledge of ancient times doesn't really go back too much further than ancient Greece and
Or the Romans, because apparently you're
and
always
the
thinking about
Romans.
them.
Yeah, the Romans or the Dark Ages, like a lot of that kind of stuff. I have a fairly decent knowledge of when it comes to a common person that doesn't do it for a living.
The earlier, well, yes, you're right, and so you're right though.
Educate me, and all of your listeners.
The earliest, well, obviously, as you said, it come from ancient strategy games, particularly early variants of chess, and it originated as part of Chaturanga, which created in the 6th century Indian subcontinent, and it was a simulation of warfare, and particularly of the Kurukshetra War. And that's where all of the and so there were pieces representing different roles that started. And so different counselors, there was infantry, cavalry, chariots, elephants, which is a big thing. And like we said, a lot of chess variants turned into minis for
Yeah.
war games, and that's where it started. The big one, the one that a lot of people talk about, is the King's Game, which was created in 1780 by Helvig. It was a master of pages to the Duke of Brunswick, and he had a board with 1,666 squares and
Okay.
varying types of terrain. Sounds pretty normal, right, for
Yeah.
wargaming.
Yeah.
And this kind of realistic representation of of military wargaming became known as a Kriegsspiele, which is wargame in German.
Mhm.
But it was really the in the 19th century that this kind of kicked off. Wargaming moved from professionals, the space, into the hobby market with the very famous game Little Wars,
Yeah.
which was a choice
1913.
exactly made by
That's about where I got started in my knowledge
who
by
who
H.G.
it
Wells.
yes. Very good, sir. Yes, exactly. By H.G. Wells, and which is the game that very famously Peter Cushing is playing and making in those videos of him sitting, Grand Moff Tarkin sitting on the floor painting his minis. That's the game that he is playing is Little Wars,
Yeah.
and it became a very popular collectible and thing that everybody would play, not just kids. And so that's really where wargaming started in those
Yeah.
days. But yeah, exactly. And the third thing we wanted to quickly mention is historical reenactments. And do you want to take a guess as to when these started?
The only thing I know about historical reenactments generally is like the Civil War reenactments that they do
Oh, very
nowadays.
good.
So
It did
I'm
start much earlier than that, but the Civil War is a really big one, especially for the States. But reenactments go all the way back to the classical period. Rome
okay.
had reenactments of wars.
Now
In the
you're not
middle,
talking theater, right? Like when they're doing their plays and like because obviously the Greeks, had stages and they would reenact wars on
no,
stage
but even
as
that, yes,
theatrical.
exactly,
So
yes.
if we're counting that, then yeah. Far back as theater
Yes,
goes, right?
exactly, exactly so. And even in the Middle Ages, they were very popular. Their May Day plays would reenact things. Obviously, tournaments were reenactments of specific battles as well. It was really in the 19th century that historical reenactments became huge. And again, and then they became a part of living history because there was a very big fashion for people to play, like get dressed up and play out their old they usually either on
Right.
a celebrate an anniversary or like in terms of the Civil War, celebrate an anniversary and reenact. And this is where LARPing sort of came out of. And we mention LARPing because LARPing grew out of the tabletop space. But all three of these things combined together is responsible for TTRPGs. And that's why I think it's important just to mention briefly some of these
The
things.
setup, the prequel to the show, the story,
Exactly.
the movie, the game, the thing, all the
And Nick,
things.
and Nick, you correctly said that without wargaming, we can't have TTRPGs.
Correct. Yeah.
So, where did TTRPGs come from? Do you know?
So from what I'm understanding, there were three guys really that are part of that. That's you've got obvious. A lot of people know Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson kind of put together D&D, but before that, Gary Gygax, and a partner of his whose name is blanking for me created a game called Chainmail, which was still a war game,
Mm-hmm.
was still kind of a war game, and it's based off of their wargaming stuff. But at the same exact time, and that's in Wisconsin, at the same exact time over in Minnesota, Dave Arneson was creating this game called Blackmore, which was
Mm-hmm.
also kind of a spin-off. It's like, well, we have these war games, but we want to tell a story with these war games. And so he kind of had that idea, and eventually they heard about each other's things. There was crossover because, it's only one state apart. And then they came together and they kind of put those rules together between Chainmail and Blackmore to create what we now know as Dungeons and Dragons.
10 on 10. Very good, Nick. Amazing. So, in the late 60s, the fantasy elements started creeping into the war games. Obviously, the popularity of things like Lord of the Rings become exploding in the late
Yeah.
50s and early 60s. And it
The
was
novels, people, the novels.
I know we're so annoying, aren't we? We always intrude everything. Linguist Mar Baker began using wargaming sessions in his world called Takeme or Takemel, and that was his thing, and that was in the late 60s. Again, he had a wargaming session where he threw in fantasy elements and he made a world for it. And then in 1970, the New England Wargaming Association demonstrated a war game that was based on Middle Earth at a fantasy convention.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and then
I
it was
forget about that.
yeah, and it was Greg Stafford who created White Bear and Red Moon to explore some of his world conflicts. And then again, these were th war games that were showcased at conventions that people
Hmm.
started playing. And then, just as you said, there was the University of Minnesota in 1969, Dave Weasley as the moderator for a Napoleonic setting called Brownstein. And then Gary Gygax and Jeff Perrin
Yep.
were,
Jeff Perrin, that's his name.
yeah,
That's the
that's
one I
his
was
name.
talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Wargaming Society developed for the Siege of Bodenberg, but like you said, it was still very wargamey. It didn't
Right.
have, and then as you said, 1971 was Chainmail. Yeah, and that's more historical. A later
Yeah, that's where they
edition,
kind of did like, historical fantasy-ish.
yeah. And as you said, it was Dave Arneson who participated in these weekly sessions, who then developed Blackmore, which was again by 1971, he started running the same thing, the same sort of things. But Blackmore was interesting because it was the first time that we had hit points, experience points, character levels, armor classes, dungeons. So it was really Blackmore
Yeah.
that
Some
so
progressions.
exactly, yes, character progression, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So what year did D&D come out, Nick?
It's like 73, 74. It's kind of
Oh,
on the fence, depending on who you talk to. Whether it's the official published release or just like the year that they were playing it and they had a printed book, but it wasn't published yet. So it's kind of around that neck of the woods, depending on who you talk to and who considers it officially released air quotes.
Right. And who officially released it?
Uh, it wasn't, was it TSR yet? I don't think
Yes, it
TSR
was
was out yet. Yeah, tactical
TSR.
study rules, tactical study rules. I
Yes,
had it written
very.
down over here. I looked over. I was like, oh, I got it here. I wrote it down so I could remember what TSR stands for. Because nobody remembers what TSR stands for.
No,
It's just
no.
TSR.
Yeah, that's
Unless you
right.
worked there, in the 70s and 80s, then you remember what it is, of course.
I wish
But
we had Ed here, Ed Greenwood, because he would be sitting here just going
right.
and waiting for you. Yes, exactly. So D&D is technically the first commercially available role-playing game, and that
Yeah.
was
And they weren't even called role-playing games because they didn't there wasn't a word
no.
for it.
Yeah, that's right. There was no word for it. It was just Dungeons and Dragons, and it was published 1974 was the official full release of it. But it was marketed as a niche product. It was barely even marketed as a game. And it was Gary Gygax expected to sell about 50,000 copies. But he was pretty smart and he went to the college students and
Yeah.
he started showing them also like sci-fi fandom as well.
Yeah.
He was showing these things around to people, and then of course because of this, because there were still other things that were going on at the time. This is just the first commercially successful one.
Right.
Do you remember? Do you remember what came after D&D, or was developed around the same time?
Video games? Is that
Ah,
where you're going? Are you going
we're
to video
we're
games?
close. We're close to video games. Not yet. Not yet though. Um, do you know some of the names of the other role-playing games that were made around the same time as D&D?
The original D&D? No. Because like as far as I know, some of the other stuff didn't come around till later in the 70s from what I remember, but I nuance I didn't really go looking to be like, was there other stuff in the 1971 era? I know Traveler came out a little bit later on. Um, gosh, I think Call of Cthulhu came out in 80.
Yeah.
So
Traveler was 1977. Yeah.
that's I think those are the earliest ones I can think of.
There was
Am I
one.
close?
You're very,
There's
well,
one
Traveler
more.
is certainly one of the earliest. One of the other ones that was being developed around the time of D&D was Tunnels and Trolls in 1975,
Tunnels
designed.
and Trolls. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I hear that name, and every time I hear that name, I'm like, that's not a real game. That somebody just made that up as
Yes, it absolutely.
that's for a TV or movie so they don't get sued by D&D is what that is.
Yeah, Tunnels of Trolls is like D&D but green. And so 1975 designed by Ken St. Andre and it was published by Flying Buffalo and it was really interesting. It was the second one modern role-playing game that was published, but it was different because you could actually play by yourself. And
Oh,
yeah, and you also could do play by mail, which is pretty crazy in those days. You could do campaigns by mail with this one. But also in 1975, around the same exact time as Boot Hill.
Boot Hill.
Yeah,
Was that really a role-playing game though?
yeah, it technically is. Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I
Uh,
suppose it is. Now that yeah.
Empire of the Petal Throne was another
I
one,
don't
and
know
On
that one.
Guard that came out in all of them in 1975.
Okay.
So there's also a little bit, and then a little bit after that were the ones that you had mentioned. So there's Chivalry and Sorcery in 1977. Also 1977 is Arduin RuneQuest, classic 19,
RuneQuest, yep.
yep,
Yep, from
1970.
Chaosium Games.
Yeah, exactly, 1978. But then the science fiction stuff getting introduced was getting introduced, and so then we have exactly as you said, Traveler, Metamorphosis Alpha, Gamma World,
Gamma
and
World,
then
yeah.
there was even superhero stuff, to go with the comic world. So there was Superhero 2044, and City State of Invincible Overlord as well. So there was a lot of these things cropping up around the same time, and a lot of them, and a lot of these also some of these even started with like live action groups, which is why we mentioned LARPing or why we
LARPing.
mentioned historical reenactment because one of the first live action role-playing settings was in Darko here, and it became very popular at conventions. And even then we had publications like Dragon Magazine that would
Yeah.
start talking about these things. Can you remember? Um, when advanced D&D came out.
Yes. I actually have that written down. It's right here in front of me. It says 1989 is where I have it on my notes. On those notes, I have two sets of notes. 1989 was AD&D, but also keep in mind there were like four or five other versions of D&D that came out between those.
That's right.
So you've got like the red box stuff that
Hmm.
came out. You get basic D&D, so there's lots of these other versions of D&D that came out between that and AD&D, and there's a lot of confusion between AD&D, the other versions of D&D, a second edition, so there's all these little nuances of D&D that keep happening because they keep like shifting and changing it.
The original AD&D was proposed. It was developed from 77 to 79,
Mhm.
and but it was a huge project with lots of books, and so this was the
Yeah.
ambitious part
Oh,
that people.
AD&D first edition, yeah,
Yeah,
77. I see that. I was talking about the AD&D second edition was in 89.
yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that's where things really started to kick off. But this is where we started to get modules
Yeah.
where you had small booklets where you could do like little one-shot stories of different adventure settings. And do you know when the first Dungeon Master Guide was
I was
published?
actually going to say, did you know that the Monsters Manual came out before the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide?
Yes, very good. So tell us when
77, then 78, then 79 was the DMG. Was
yeah.
when the DMG came out. So the DMG came out dead last out of those three. The Monsters Manual was out first. It's like, here's the monsters. You don't have any idea how to play the AD&D first edition rules, but here's the monsters. Enjoy. We'll get you the rest of it next year.
That mail order, man. Those mail order playthroughs. It's pretty ambitious if you think about how it was back in the day. I mean, you had a series of games that you could play over several books, but then you had to wait for the actual Dungeon Master Guide
Right.
before you got the Monster Manual before the DM guide. It's pretty. Do you imagine like the I can imagine the rules lawyers in the early days going, "You can't do that." You go, "Where does it say? Where does it say?" And it doesn't say
Well,
anywhere.
because a lot of them were using the original, the old other editions,
Hmm.
those rule sets for the new game. So they're like, we don't really know what this particular stat is. So we're just going to play it by ear until, whatever comes out. Or like some of the classes, right? The player classes, when you look back at the original D&D, the classes, they didn't have like races and classes. Elf was a class.
Yes.
You didn't pick like an elven fighter. You're just an elf, period. End of
Yes.
subject. You
Yes.
know, so there was no differentiation of whether is that the word differentiation different.
Yeah,
I'm like now every time I'm talking to you, I'm like start second guessing words that I'm putting in my brain. I'm like, do I say that right? Michelle's gonna get me on this.
I
The
won't.
the difference of words of the different classes. So it's like there's like I said, you're either an elf or you're not an elf,
Hmm.
or you're a wizard, or there's no elven wizard. There's none of that. So
So, we of course now come to the time where we talk about the Satanic Panic because Nick, you mentioned it a little bit. So, would you like to tell people who don't know about this absolutely stupid, ridiculous thing what Satanic Panic is or was?
so there was a moment, and I don't remember what triggered it. But like there is all this like D&D is evil, D&D is the devil, all these evil things come out of it. You know, the open up the super Christians would open up a book, go like, oh my God, there's devils in this book. There's devils in the monsters manual. Not understanding what it is, and they just think, oh, this is a book for worshiping the devil, essentially, is what how they said it. And so you also had that, and then you had people with bad so from my experiences my mom knew people that had died from D&D, but the reason is they were all on drugs.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's just when
Yeah.
you say like death by D&D, I'm like, did the monsters come out and kill
No,
them?
they were full-fledged adults that had gotten high on I don't even know what it was, and they were LARPing D&D, and they were high and they thought the monster was going to kill them. So sword in hand. Uh, and stuff like that gave it a bad rap, but nobody was there to argue against it. There wasn't really this is good sort of situation. And so after my experience, uh, with my mom before she finally broke down and realized what it was. By the way, years later, she would come to me like, "Hey, tell me your D&D story. Tell me the backstory of whatever you guys are playing right now." Like she thought it was so great, like completely 360 many years later. But yeah, there's just like this huge this is evil. People were burning D&D books, other role-playing books, all their role-playing games got thrown under the bus too. So yeah, it was not a good time for the D&D world. I'm sure you have far more details than I've given on
No, I
where
mean
it exactly
there's
started,
been
but
many academic papers about this and what caused the weird thing because it wasn't only D&D that was thrown into the satanic panic. It
right,
was a
right,
lot of
right.
it was a lot of stuff in the 80s. Certain horror films were thrown in there as well. But it was
Music,
yeah, exactly music. A lot of metal music was thrown into the
yeah.
satanic
If you play
panic.
this song backwards, you can hear this.
And as you say, a lot of it was just fueled by ignorance and drugs. And
Yeah,
there was a lot of reports. It's the same thing with people saying that video games cause violence nowadays. We have every study in the world, every medical study in the world showing that it's actually quite the opposite. And so specifically for role-playing games, there's been tons of academic research done into why they've made these claims and what happened. And obviously now we know that D&D is actually really good for you. It's not only good for fostering community, but it's a healthy way to learn math and also learn negotiating skills and also to
yeah.
to put yourself in a situation that would make you think differently. It's a really good
Social skills, yeah. Problem
social.
problem solving,
Well,
math,
considering how
writing.
nerdy we all are, I wouldn't say much for the social skills, but definitely, definitely for the team building skills. But there was a whole claim against not only D&D but TSR as a whole, stating that there were demonic rituals in the books, and just exactly as you say that it would lead to suicide by players, and it was all just absolute nonsense. And it was a lot of religious organizations made pamphlets warning of the dangers of D&D. But
Yeah.
again, it's the same, and we see it now even with a lot of people, trying to pull the reins of D&D and trying to say what it is and what it is not. And now that D&D is more popular than ever, thanks to COVID and the wonderful world of video conferencing, now people can
Yeah.
partake in it whenever they want. It's really just media attention that got these things stigmatized, people not understanding what exactly, but it also led to a good like critical success for a lot of games because as always, when you tell people don't look at
Don't do
something,
it. Yep, rebel. I'm gonna do that. Yep. It's like free marketing. You couldn't ask for better marketing,
what press and TSR
right?
certainly benefited from it, absolutely. What other? So we talked about GURPS. Do you remember any other really early role-playing games that you played?
Early on, Werewolf, White Wolf, Vampire the
White Wolf.
Masquerade,
Yeah.
those games were very big. That was my first introduction to LARPing, in fact, was White Wolf and playing, vampires. And it wasn't my cup of tea because of when I discovered the reasons why my mom and the Satanic Panic stuff happened. It left, and when I did research and I realized exactly what kind of where that came from, it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth on LARPing in general. And so yeah, we did a little bit of LARPing for Vampire the Masquerade, and
Was
that
Masquerade
was
too
really
edgy for you?
no, it was I enjoyed playing the system like regular role playing, but just the LARPing part, I was like, yeah, I don't wanna. This is weird. No, sorry. And I'm a theater kid, right? I'm a theater kid, so that shouldn't have been a big deal. But um, other games, Shadowrun.
Ah, yeah.
There were some early Shadowrun games. Obviously, I don't know if we mentioned Call of Cthulhu.
I was
Uh,
just about to mention Call of Cthulhu because Chaosium
yeah.
published both RuneQuest and Call of Cthulhu. So
Hmm.
RuneQuest was, as we said, 1978, and Call of Cthulhu was 1981. and Call of Cthulhu is still with us. And then we talked a little bit about, so we didn't talk about Iron Crown Enterprises, which was Rollmaster, but we talked a little bit about Palladium.
Palladium, yeah.
So they did Mechanoid Invasion, and then of course Rifts, which was one of my first big ones. There was also Victory Games, West End Games. There were so many because of this. Don't do it, don't do it. And then in the 80s, there was this explosion of all these games that
All of
came
them.
out.
There was a Ghostbusters RPG by West
Yeah.
End Games. Star Wars. I forget about Star Wars. The Star Wars RPG by West End Games was fantastic. And if we mentioned Rifts and mentioned GURPS, we got to mention Car Wars.
Oh my gosh. That's a name I haven't heard in a long
Just
time.
saying, just saying, not saying, just saying.
It's true. Wow, yeah, I haven't heard that a lot. So GURPS was 1986. That's how old it is. So we date both of ourselves. Oh my
Yep,
God. But yeah, I do remember GURPS. I have and but GURPS was great because it was generic and you could just use it for anything. You could use
for
it for
anything.
any setting whatsoever.
Yeah,
And and that's how I got into a lot of the Japanese role playing games because they used GURPS as well, because
yeah.
it was easy for them to adapt all of their anime and manga stuff to this style
Japan
of
Sword, is that what it's called?
yeah,
Sword World in Japan? Sword
yeah,
World, right?
exactly. But you had mentioned video games.
I
Uh,
did. I
Nick,
did.
what are the first role-playing video games? Do you remember?
I think Dungeon is probably the first one because it was just a text-based Apple, like not even Apple, it was pre-Apple. It was like just a text-based, you walk into a dungeon, sort of situation. Um, I
I remember
know,
Adventure. I remember Adventure. Technically, and we could talk about that's, maybe the ARPG, but I'll never forget that stupid pixelated dragon. I
right.
swear to God, I'll never forget it. What else is early that you
I
remember?
think I think a lot of people give most credit to games like Ultima and Wizardry. Wizardry. I think a lot of people go
Still
there.
going. Wizardry,
Um,
new game.
so a lot of people go to those as like that's the iconic ones that people remember as being the first ones. But I'm pretty sure the Dungeon video game. I don't think anything predates Dungeon.
There's
So I know
there's a
Dragon
couple.
Slayer, Hide Light, and Zelda were pretty iconic as well, but those came a little bit later down the road. Go ahead. I didn't mean to
The
interrupt
Rogue.
you.
No, not at all.
Rogue, yeah, Rogue, of
Rogue.
course.
Rogue was in 1980. It was very, very early.
I mean,
And
it started an entire genre that we now call roguelike or roguelite games, which I've actually been playing one lately on stream. So
yeah, roguelite. And there's also Alkalabeth, which I don't think many people
I don't even.
remember at all, because it was very, very old. But as you say, Dungeon was certainly one of the Wizardry was one of the biggest ones. But Rogue was 1980, and many people considered that one because it's exploration focused and the procedurally generated mazes,
Yeah,
mages too.
Mages.
That was one of the originals, certainly. Wizardry was 1981, as you mentioned. Ultima was 1981. So again, all of these around the same time, and then obviously the Ultima and Wizardry. Out of that, we got Dragon Quest, of course, Dragon Quest, and then after that, we got Final Fantasy. So we have a lot of those very early, but it was because of mainframe computers that they were able to take those rules and able to take a lot of those aspects of tabletop
Hmm.
RPGs and put them into dungeon crawlers. And
Right,
that's
and
how
that's
we got
directly from tabletop RPGs. Like that's it's not like they came up with their own thing. They're like, let's put this on a computer. Let's put D&D on a computer was the original thought.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so when you think about it, when you think about today's video games, the most popular video games in a very long time, whether you want to even do Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead Revolver, you want to do Skyrim, you want to do Cyberpunk, you want to do any of the MMOs, all of those, whatever you're looking at, whatever's popular right now, the majority of video games wouldn't have be what they are if there was no tabletop role playing, if there was no D&D.
That's right. And which is why we have to thank that for, especially for things like Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 3 is certainly amazing, and certainly one of the most successful RPG games ever.
Yeah, yeah.
And all because people were like, let's take a TTRPG and let's put it in a computer. And that's where we came from. Of course, now we have, a lot of our computer or a lot of our ARPGs now come from things like having point and click adventures, narrative adventures all together.
Hmm.
But we would be remiss if we did not talk about game books. Do you know much about the original game books, Nick?
Would define to your audience, not me, because I know, of course, what you mean by a game book. Because
Do you
I, of course, know
do you
what you
remember
mean.
what fighting fantasy is?
No, I remember hearing about it, but I don't remember it because I never
Well,
played it. I never played it.
so there's in the early days of obviously D&D. So
What an
we had
educated guest you brought on.
no, I usually because usually TTRPG people well if I say if I say the title Warlock on Firetop Mountain.
Yes. I mean, I know the name. I haven't played it
Yes,
yet.
that is like
And
one
I
of the
knew the other name. I
first.
just didn't.
Do you know who created the first game books? Do you remember who it
No,
was?
but what is in a game book? Is it just like a single player?
So a game book is a mixture of really D&D and a choose your own adventure game. That's
Okay.
what a game
That's what I
book
was
is.
thinking you were talking
Yeah.
about, but I was like, I can't, I wasn't quite sure. So,
And it was obviously it was well, we talked a little bit about GURPS and how that was Steve Jackson games.
yeah.
But later on, when we're talking about playing games by yourself, fighting fantasy, which is what it's now known as, a lot of the gaming books were things that you could read and play yourself.
Okay.
So obviously, Warlock on Firetop Mountain, the Sorcery series, which was 4 books, which now you can physically play them. There are so many video games that were based on these books, and they're now reissuing these books. But you read the book, you were the character in the book. Some of the books even had stats that you would write down. So you would say, okay, I have 20 HP at the start of the book. You would go through the book, and based on the choices you'd make, you'd take 1 point off for damage. Oh, you would get a sword. That would give you 1 point, and you had to take little notes on the side
Oh,
to
okay.
know where you were in the story. So it was really the first kind of like carry over character progression that you could do solo. And it was amazing. I still have my copy of Warlock on Firetop Mountain.
So here's the funny part is we're talking about this and I'm like, I'm not recollecting anything. And so I'm like, I'm just going to throw in a search. And here's the best part. Here's the best part. I chatted with Steve Jackson and we talked about it. We talked about it on the show. And now I'm like, I'm an idiot. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I remember me and Steve talked about fighting fantasy for about 5, 10 minutes
Him and Ian
and its impact
Livingston.
on the gaming thing. Yeah, him and Ian. So, yep, there's me. I have a thing that I have when I do live streaming video games and people can redeem and it says goldfish. You type in exclamation mark goldfish and a goldfish swims across the screen and it's like it gives you that the more we know kind of sound. It gives that, but it
The
says
more
memory of a
you
goldfish that
know.
shows up.
Yeah.
So it says memory of a goldfish because sometimes have a memory of a goldfish and I don't
No, but
remember
so
things.
there was the thing is a fighting fantasy came out with Endless Quest, which is also very similar.
Yes, yes.
And Choose Your Own Adventure books started in 1979. And so they added this TTRPG element onto the Choose Your Own Adventure. And fighting fantasy became a thing. It became a huge thing. And there were tons and tons of books. And now there are Inkle has taken those and made sorcery, which you can play all 4 of the sorcery series. You can play, I think it starts with City of Thieves, or maybe that's book 2. And you can play that. And you actually, now they actually built a board with it, and you can see your character and where they go. And there's actually a map. But the books were just a way for you, and you could, if you died, you went, all right, and then you just went back to the beginning of the game and
Yeah.
or went back to the beginning of the book, or or you could go back to the previous chapter and try again. But the books were so well written that it didn't you kind of didn't even feel like you were it really felt like this incredible first person dungeon crawler where it's kind of that one-to-one motion, so sort of like
Right.
Call of Cthulhu, where you have that you take a step, you see this gentleman, what do you do? And then you choose, and then of course the reaction happens. And it really was incredible. And I loved the Final Fantasy books, and they're still going. Beyond a Pratchett wrote one
Yeah.
recently.
And so is Endless Quest. Endless
Yeah,
Quest, they released a bunch of them. Wizards of the Coast had Matt Forbeck do a bunch of Endless Quest games as well.
nice.
So,
And Fighting Fantasy now they have, like I said, they have like six different versions of Warlock on Firetop Mountain. One is like a board game version, another one is just the text-based one. Fighting Fantasy now has an app that you can read in your phone, and it just gives you all the books. And you don't even have to do anything. It will calculate your stats on the side of the little tab that you can, so you could sit and play and it will do all the calculations for you. So you don't, now they even have I saw that there's a company that makes a D&D pad. And so it's like Final Fantasy where it's just a pad, but the pad is a randomized dungeon. And so depending on which way you go and you choose to go, so you take your pencil at the beginning of the little dungeon. It's just a grid pad. And then you say, okay, I want to go over here. And then you roll to see what happens. And then it's a randomized sort of chess thing. It's kind of like playing Munchkin
right.
on a little grid. And again, Steve Jackson games.
Steve Jackson games. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, a board game with D&D elements to it that's very simple to play and easy. And I wanted to take a moment though to talk about editions, and I wanted to ask, do you remember playing second edition D&D?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh
and
yeah.
do you remember?
That was my second game right after GURPS. Literally the same year I learned GURPS, I played second edition D&D. That's
Did you play it when it came out? It came out in 1988, or did you play it later?
no, it was later. It was later on.
Okay, so what was so special? We mentioned a little bit earlier. What was so special about D&D version 2?
Do you want to talk? Are you asking about THACO? Is that what you
Yes.
want to talk about? You want to talk
Yes.
about two hit armor class zero?
Yes.
Yes.
Would tell everybody what THACO was, Nick.
So for those that don't role play, you had an armor rating. So the more armor you put on, the lower your armor score would be. So you'd start off at like a 10. So if you had no armor, you were buck naked running around the woods, your armor score was a 10. And the more you put on, the lower that number would get. And so you wanted to roll a die 20, and your THACO was whatever it was to hit a zero. So if your THACO was a 10, you had to roll a 10 or better on your 20-sided dice to hit an armor class zero. And then you had to do math because not everybody had an armor class of zero. So
Exactly.
you're like, okay, that's that to hit the armor class zero, but they have an armor class of five. So it's this number minus the five divided by the square root of infinity, and then you have your to hit. And you're like, okay. The rest of the game, though, was usually math. Instead of minusing, you were adding. So eventually, when third edition came out, they went, yeah, maybe we should just make it so everything is add. And we don't have all of this, like, everything is add except for the biggest part of combat, which is hitting them with your sword. That's not plussing, that's minusing. Uh, so so yeah. Two hit armor class zero is to hit their armor at when it's at a zero, and then if it wasn't at a zero, then you had to do a math from zero to wherever their armor was to see if they hit. And I usually just made my GM do the math. I'd be like, I rolled a 15. I have an armor. I have a THACO of a 10. What does that get me? And they're like, math.
I mentioned this because this is essentially how a lot of games stayed alive, is they made new editions with obviously new rules.
Hmm.
And other ones we had talked about earlier, we didn't mention Ars Magica, which in
Oh
1988
yeah, yeah,
was one of the first ones that really emphasized less math, less rules, and instead was more about storytelling rather than, nowadays we have, easy peasy one shots where you're like, all right,
yeah,
let's just do the one shot. Let's just do this one campaign. Here's your pre-made character. Here's all the stats. You don't have to think about anything. Let's just go, and we're going for the story sort of aspect. Like let's say like Rise of Tiamat or something like that.
yeah,
Whereas Ars Magica, even though that was a completely different game, it was really one of the first ones to emphasize experience on the storytelling and get rid of all that math.
right.
And then we talked a little bit about White Wolf. And so it's the same thing with, something like Vampire the Masquerade was actually quite late. It was 1991. But Vampire was all D10s, so super easy. And you had all your little stats that you would fill out, but you would get more experience by not by combat, which is how D&D ran at the time, and still sort of does to a certain extent. Now you can get,
Yeah.
other points for doing other things. But all the White Wolf games and the World of Darkness universe was more getting experience by the storytelling and how you used your character versus that. And so you'll always see the wars between people who are like, oh, I don't like White Wolf, versus people who are like, actually, I really like trying to figure out how to use my character when I can't go around during the day. Or when I have to keep maintain the masquerade, which is, for those who haven't played, which is if you're playing Vampire the Masquerade, you have to maintain that presence of going, I am human and everything's fine.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you break them, the whole thing is if you break the masquerade, you're done like
People will
that.
know. Yeah, you don't want
Yeah,
the world to, the
yeah,
men in black
exactly.
suits will come and get you, and Will Smith will smack you around, and all that fun stuff. Uh,
Exactly. Uh, but we
I
didn't,
want,
we,
I wanted, I wanted
go
to
ahead.
go on to something real quick because you were talking about the difference where it's a little bit more story based, right?
Hmm.
There were some terms that came around, and some of them came from wargaming, some terminology, and there are two terms that a lot of people know when it comes to talking about the difference between storytelling and these are the numbers you find on your sheet and you're rolling your dice, and those are fluff and crunch.
Uh,
And so generally the fluff is the storytelling. It's not it's the storytelling, it's the grandiose whatever, the descriptions of the things, and you're just kind of winging it. The crunch is literally the numbers. You're crunching the numbers, or as Chit would say, crunching the numbers, that kind of thing. Wasn't sure if you get the reference, but the math, the THACO, like, okay, well, according to this, it's these are the numbers, and this is how the math works out. And so some people say like, yeah, I don't care too much about the crunch in the game, or they don't want to play a game with too much crunch, or they don't want to play a game with too much fluff. And that also comes from a lot of wargaming stuff, and that kind of started around the 80s as well.
There's also in the 80s that people kind of, because a lot of our nowadays, a lot of our gaming stuff is very D&D or centric. So it's around, like two companies that make
Right,
stuff. Whereas in the 80s, there was also the Schwarzei, which was the Dark Eye series from Germany, which is extremely popular. And they also had their own computer games. I played a lot of them actually. And there's also Drakar och Dummer, which was in Sweden. And Warhammer fantasy setting was 1986. And that started that whole aspect. We could talk about 40K another time.
yeah,
But
Games Workshop, all of their stuff. Games
all their
Workshop was
stuff,
huge
I could say I
impact.
could I could say another word that is less kind. Yeah, so would you like to talk a little bit about Games Workshop and their impact
I
on
just was
TTRPGs?
just throwing out there the Games Workshop had a huge impact when it came to like all of the things they made, whether it was games or mini games, wargaming, um, the kind of the I don't want to say reintroduction of bringing minis to things, but they had a lot of influence over the TTRPG world for whatever different reasons. And a lot of the people when I talk to a lot of people from the tabletop role playing world, Games Workshop is almost always brought up. Whether
Hmm.
whether people worked there, whether they went from Games Workshop to TSR, from TSR to Games Workshop, anytime anybody from the US went over to the UK, they went to Games Workshop to meet their friends that worked at Games Workshop, and vice versa. So it was kind of a parallel, very very parallel, like not really a partnership, but they kind of were all friends. A lot of the people from both genres and both worlds. So
Another
it's
really
fun.
big influence on, I guess, later RPG stuff. I mean, we could talk about as well Wizards of the Coast and how they got started. I mean, obviously Peter Adkison and Richard Garfield in 1993 made.
Magic the Gathering.
Yes, very good, Nick. Yeah,
I'm like,
Magic the
I'm like,
Gathering.
there's not another answer for that. That's magic, right?
Yes, yes, a game that I could not afford when I was when I was 13
Right,
years old, but I did get to play it in camp. And again, that brought in a lot of that brought in their tabletop elements. They had their own rules. Obviously, Magic has
right.
started with its own rules, but that now Wizards of the Coast owns pretty much
Everything,
everything.
everything.
And so now there's a lot of back and forth. Now you can play a D&D style magic, or you could put, you could have a magic campaign D&D. And then and then to add to this, we had things in 1994. Obviously, Elder Scrolls popped in, and that became an original sort of pen and paper style experience. Because remember, it wasn't originally
A video game.
made. Yeah, yes, exactly. It was very different, the original Elder Scrolls. It was not, Skyrim. It was more of a tabletop style RPG. So was Fallout, right? Fallout was also
Yeah,
originally top-down CRPG. That's what it was. It's not the same thing that it is now.
I prefer Skyrim.
Let's not, Nick. I will kick you off this program. No, we always have that argument because I am the person who says Skyrim is not that great or not as
Skyrim's
good
the
as
best game in the world of history. It's not, but I'm
not as
pushing.
good
I'm
as
just pushing.
Morrowind.
Just pushing your buttons.
You are, as I say all the time, I love that it has made so many people's lives happy. I love that people have found a game that they can mod, they can enjoy, they can have their own adventures in Skyrim. That is wonderful. I have tried 6 times now, and it, for whatever reason, has just never clicked with me. I mean, the memes are great. I love them. There was one today somebody sent me about Borderlands 4. And it's like, oh God, Borderlands 4 is so buggy. Look at this bug. And so it's the character going, wee, and she's falling through the map, and she falls through the map into Skyrim, and she wakes up.
You
And
shared me that. You shared that. I don't know if you. I think you sent it to
it was
me.
me. I almost passed out laughing. That
Yeah, and then
was
it's like, oh, and then he wakes up on the wagon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love the memes. I love the backwards flying dragon. There are things that I think are great. I love Thomas the Tank Engine, one of my favorite mods of all time. I cannot to this day get it Sky. And it's really because of the silliness of. I mean, I love a silly. I love comedy games. I need that. Bard's Tale is one of my favorite games, one of my favorite RPGs of all time because of it's so brilliantly written and the comedy is so great. But when it comes to Skyrim, when you are the Dragonborn and you are the only one who can do what you do because, oh, you are Dragonborn. And then you go up to get your abilities, and what do? You meet 20 people who can do things you can't do. You just go,
Right.
wait, why am I the
Right. Why don't you go? Why don't you
Dragonborn?
go do it?
What's happening here? And I just went, wait a minute, you just told me I was the Dragonborn, and that I'm the only one who can Fusro. Why are there 40 other monks who can do exactly the same thing and they're not helping people? And so this is my question again with this. Also, I can't play a lot of first person games anymore because I have simulation sickness, so
Yeah.
I'm not able to play that game. But I love it for you. I love that you think it's the best game ever, and I'm so
I don't
happy
really think it's
that
the
you love
best
it.
game ever. I don't. I couldn't even tell you what I think the best game ever is, to be fair. To be
Oh, I
fair.
was I was gonna I was gonna ask, what do you so in modern times, because we've made it all the way till the 90s, which is when I mean, I according to my brain is 5 years ago.
Same.
So, yeah.
Same.
So, speaking as a 41-year-old, I still think 1995 was 5 years ago. So, I had to remind a neighbor of mine that 1995 was 30 years ago, and I almost threw up a little bit in my mouth. So, what do you so since the late 90s, early 2000s, what are some of your favorite RPGs or TTRPGs?
Uh, I obviously D&D has got to be on there. Pathfinder. So we talked about editions, and they came out with D&D 3.0,
Mm-hmm.
goes to 3.5. There's a game called Pathfinder, which is basically 3.7 D&D
Yeah.
3.75, which is kind of what we still play mainly in our real friend group. But there's a lot of games that I really enjoy outside of that. Mutants and Masterminds is a great superhero game that I also
Mm-hmm.
think is very universal. There's a lot of things you can do with it. I'd love to run like an anime based, use Mutants and Masterminds to play any anime character you ever want in history, stuff like that. Deadlands has a couple of versions, but I like the original Deadlands because we talk about mechanics and yes, dice and miniature figures and all of that. And this one's like, yeah, you still have dice, but you also have poker chips and playing cards because you're in the Old West and you're using them, you're drawing cards for initiative and you're drawing cards to use your magic and all of that. And it was a very unique and fun system that was thematic to playing a game in the Old West, which of course they had a post-apocalyptic version, and now they have like a noir version, and every era they have a different thing for Deadlands. So those are some of the ones that really stand out to
Do you
me.
remember
Like
what
there are
year?
other Star Wars.
Do you remember what year Pathfinder came out?
Pathfinder. I think I have it here.
It
I think
was
I wrote it
developed
down.
it was developed in certain years, but do you remember the year that it was officially released?
And that was my issue because they were releasing D&D 3.5 stuff for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, all of a sudden, they were like, "Oh, we're going to release this thing," and it was somewhere. God, I don't know if it was 2003 or 2004. It was somewhere. It was somewhere around fourth edition.
So part of this, so Pathfinder came out because it was made to be it was around 2009. And Pathfinder, as you said, was it was riding on the success of
Yeah,
3.5. But it just it had its own rule, but it refined certain things about 3.5, and it was made to be compatible with 3.5. And
I was
then
looking at my timeline and I was looking at Group's fourth edition, not D&D fourth edition, which I have at Group's fourth edition at 2004. And then I looked out, guys, oh yeah, D&D fourth edition, 2008.
yes. And so I remember, but 3.5 was the one I played the most. And like I said, I had the stack of books and
Hmm.
everything. And that was the one we were playing the most. And then in 2008, fourth edition came out. And it was,
Can we poo-poo things? Can we?
yes, you
I'm
are,
sorry to my friends that worked on fourth edition. I'm sorry to all of my friends that worked on that and were game developers for fourth edition, but I'm sorry.
I
I
understood what they were doing.
love you all, but I'm sorry.
I understood what they were doing. They were trying to feed into, because it was very
World of
miniature
Warcraft.
heavy. Yeah. And they were trying to make everything move like Warcraft,
Yeah.
Because Warcraft came along. Well, I should say World of Warcraft, because Warcraft 1, 2,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
3
World of
were yeah.
Warcraft. WoW.
Warcraft, but again, Warcraft 1, 2, and 3 were RTSs. They were war games, right? And
Right.
they were war games, humans and orcs, and then obviously two added things, but they were war games. And then obviously in when Warcraft exploded in popularity, Warcraft, I think, was the first thing, other than Lord of the Rings, Warcraft just mowed over everything. And
Yeah.
so they wanted to appeal to the Warcraft crowd. And then suddenly every character had an at-will power. Every character could heal. Every character could bubble. Every character could this. You're like, but that's not what the point of the classes is. The point of
Yeah.
the class
And
is you
and there was a
work
feeling
together.
of there was a feeling of if you're going to play a paladin, there's only one way to play a paladin.
Yeah.
Like this, like yes, there are options to do other things, but you are going to suck if you do all of those things. You have to do this one thing to be good at your job. You can do those other things, but the game's not going to be any fun for you. And that was the part that got me the most, where I didn't want to play fourth edition, is because I felt pigeonholed to, I didn't get to have creative control. I
Right.
wanted creative
You
control.
had to use, especially if you had the minis, you had to use your character cards. So you just go, okay, I'll use these spell cards. I get everything was spells suddenly. And it just didn't really make sense. And it was not great because that's how Warcraft is, right? Everything spells and cooldowns. And so they did the same thing with fourth edition. But that fueled a lot of people over to Pathfinder. And Warcraft
Hmm.
actually had its own tabletop. I've got the book in the other room.
It
Same
does.
thing
It
with
did.
EverQuest. EverQuest also had its own
Shout out
tabletop
to
version.
EverQuest. There we go.
Yeah,
Amen.
absolutely. I still have my giant EverQuest book that I bought from the basement of chapters when it was like a giant $40 chonker that you could use as a door stopper. And I was like, oh boy, I'm going to play this with everybody. I literally never played it. I read the whole book cover to cover and nobody wanted to play it because it was so rules heavy. And so we
The
never
only
played.
EverQuest book I got was the one for the video game where it had all the zones and the maps and where you could all the
Hmm.
NPCs that you could find. It's like, oh, I'm in this zone. Okay, Neriak. Okay, this is the guy I want to. That's the
But
only
Warcraft
EverQuest
and
book I got.
EverQuest were really important, and games like the Morpegs were really important because they took that role-playing aspect, they put it into this living, breathing virtual world, and then the tabletop games tried to copy them and accommodate for
Yeah,
that crowd, and obviously it all crashed down, and that forced a lot of people over, OG people over to Pathfinder, or into the indie space where they started making their own games.
Yeah.
And that's when we started having a lot of homebrew stuff. And the open license started really getting
Yeah, the open
popular.
gaming license.
Exactly. Of people starting to make their own homebrew. And then there of course is the old school Renaissance, or rather I should say the revival, where again, because of this sort of crash of D&D, you had a lot of people going back to, well, it started a little bit earlier, but a lot of because 3.5 was so long in its iteration, so it
Yeah.
started a little bit earlier than that, but a lot of people made their own OG homebrew stuff like Castles and Crusades. Was a mixture. Everybody just went back to retro, Labyrinth and Lord, Swords and Wizardry, and a lot of people wanted to go back to that old school setting. They didn't want a lot of the new stuff.
Right.
And now in the last 10 years, because of the really the popularity of things like Critical Role, Drive Through
Yeah.
RPG, Backer Kit, Kickstarter, all this crowdfunding things, everybody's just making their own stuff now. And so now it's great. You have all these different systems. And Nick, you've had on many people who have come to showcase their games on your show. We've played a few
Yeah.
of them together as
We did.
well.
We have.
Yeah.
Well, and Big Bang Theory
Why are we
and their
mentioning the
time.
Oh God,
What's that? You know,
I hate that show so much.
but it had a huge, it had a big impact on the D&D world as well
Yes.
because like they gamed and that was a very popular show.
Yeah.
Very, very super popular. And we mentioned Critical Role, but let's not forget the heels of Critical Role, which is, Will Wheaton and Felicia Day
Yeah.
and Geek and Sundry
Yes.
doing stuff like that. And there was another one before that. There was another one before Geek and Sundry too, and I can't remember what it was
Well,
off
there
the top of
was
my
the
head.
Guild, which was Felicia Day, and obviously Tabletop for
Yeah,
Will Wheaton.
but
Yeah.
before that, there was an actual play. Before all of those, there was a different group doing actual play, much like Critical Role, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I should have wrote it down.
Talking
Um,
about well, there's actual play,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I
which
mean.
is all the which is it's like things like the Adventure Zone and obviously Critical Role. But yes, but it was
Yeah,
it was a Geek
but
and
yeah, there's one
Sundry.
before Critical Role and all them that kind of was the original, and then all of those Will Wheaton, Felicia Day, Geek and Sundry, Tabletop had such a huge impact on gaming sphere, and then doing the role playing. Because obviously that was the new renaissance of board games too, was tabletop. Tabletop
That's
was
right.
huge for the board game industry, and
Yeah.
then they started doing tabletop role playing, kind of for the same reason, and that also helped. And then of course all these voice actors go, "Hey, let's share our game and share it with the world because we're all voice actors role playing." And then Critical Role comes out, and and then shortly after that, Stranger Things comes out, and it's like, yeah, this huge boom for tabletop gaming and the pandemic, of course, but
Yeah, and
probably
then
get to
of
that a little bit
course,
later.
since we're getting to the modern day stuff, it was COVID that fueled a lot of the, yes, obviously in the early 2000s, it was still niche. And even obviously we had, there are lots.
The actual 5 years ago, the actual, not the 19, the real 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. The real 5 years ago, which was COVID, which was only 6 months or 1 year.
Yeah, it just
But
feels like it feels like we're still there, really. It's
it really does. But the YouTube, obviously Geek and Sundry and programs like it. I mean, there were so many spell slingers. There were so many geek programs now that not only would play, but where you could see people play, but it would teach you how to play.
yeah.
And I worked for Gamers Vault in those
Oh
days.
yeah.
Yeah, and we did wargaming events. We hired professional miniature painters, which is also a thing that is fueled D&D because people want professional images of their minis, right? And so a lot
Yeah.
of a lot of people learned how to paint for the wargaming space and to paint D&D minis. And that's a whole now subgenre in themselves of people who just paint D&D
Yep.
minis and maybe don't even play. And we had professional painters come. And also with the advent of social media, a lot of people sharing their minis and their campaigns on social media in the early
Yeah.
2010s started. But again, it was still to the side until the pandemic happened. And all the nerds rejoiced because we went, no more sports. Yay! No more sports forever. And now everybody has to do geek stuff. And then everybody turned to online gaming. And while, of course, a lot of people turned to things like Animal Crossing, Minecraft, other games where they could play calm games or cozy games together with their friends and family, when there was maybe no other way to spend time with people, all the nerds were like, "Well, we'll just go on Discord." I was about to say Ventrilo. Oh man, those days.
At least you didn't say Skype. I mean,
Well, our rip Skype, rip. It
rest
died
in
last
peace,
year.
Skype.
Yeah. Oh, but you could play, all us nerds just went on Discord and we're like, okay, let's just continue where we left off. And yeah, sure, you could flub rolls if you really wanted to.
Well,
Um,
some people still wanted to roll physical dice. Like I
yeah.
know, I mean, let's you talk about miniatures being its whole sub-genre. Let's talk about dice collectors.
Don't
There are
talk to
people
me
that
like that,
don't.
Nick. Don't come
There
at
are
me
people that
like
don't
this.
even role play that just like buy dice and dice and dice and dice and piles of dice. And then they're buried in dice. This should be a cartoon, a little
Every
cartoon.
time I see, because whenever you go to the conventions, you have all the places that sell the cool dice towers and everything.
Mhm.
Whenever I see the
I
like
mean, cool
there's a
dice towers is your term for it.
yeah, but they're awesome. Like I saw like there's a dice tower made of Orthanc. Who the heck doesn't want that? I want that. That's amazing. But there's oh, whenever you go to a convention at the people who sell D&D paraphernalia or role-playing paraphernalia, there's always like a tub of like cheap dice where you could just like take a scoop and put it in.
Yeah, yeah.
That every time I look at that, I go, don't touch that. That's the unlucky bin where they put all the ones that have killed characters, and that's where they put them. And then that's where characters go to die in the giant dice bin. And so I just imagine like somebody Scrooge McDucking in there, just like swimming in the dice pool of all the like
Uh,
random horrible dice.
do you know the general age of your audience? Because you say Scrooge McDucking, and there are so many people that are like, "What does that mean?"
Oh, but I think people know. There's the new DuckTales series that came out a couple of years ago.
Oh,
I
okay.
think
I guess
people
that's
know.
all right. That's good.
But
Good to
yeah,
know.
I think people know. But if they don't, this is where we learn. Go look
It's
up Scrooge McDuck going swimming in his money safe.
yeah.
That's yeah.
Google
But
is your friend. It's not, but the terminology for looking things up. It's
um, so we've come to modern day, and Nick, is there any game that you have played that you think people should know more about?
I'm gonna go with something that is super recent.
That's
Uh,
fine.
Super recent as in I played it once.
Hmm.
I ran it for the first time this weekend. I've read the rules a couple times, and it is very rules light. It is very fluff. And it's by Monty Cook Games.
Is it Monster of the Week?
No,
Oh.
no. It's so we I talked. This came about while I was talking to Shanna Germain,
Mm.
and she was talking about this game called The Devil's Dandy Dogs that had come out, and she was explaining to it, and the more she was explaining to it, the more I'm like, this sounds amazing. This sounds amazing. This sounds better than amazing. This sounds like the greatest game in the world. And you're literally playing dogs. Like your characters are all dogs,
Amazing.
and you work for the devil or whatever hierarchy you could be. You get rid of the religious connotations of what the devil is. So if you want to say it's Pharasma, if you're playing in Pathfinder or you know any other underworld, you want to say Hades, whatever you want, but you're dogs and you're made out of shadow stuff and you're working for him, and you need to go, and first you have to find the adventure where you find this person who wants to make a deal with Hades, with the devil, deal with the devil for their soul, and then later you have to do a job, whatever the job is,
Hmm.
that soul wants. So in this case, the one that I ran, they ended up going. They had to this shaman had been turned into a dog and couldn't get changed back, and he would release his spirit to the devil for exchange for getting their human form back, essentially. But it's a collaborative storytelling. So like the whole thing is you're sitting at the hearth at the fireplace with the dogs, and the dogs are telling you the story of how they did it.
Nice.
It's not
That's
actually
awesome.
necessarily what happens. And so like the dogs are there, and all the dogs have their own little personality traits. So they're like, this character really likes to play, and this character, isn't so much that they're a little bit less dog-like and a little bit more shadow-like, and they're all about like, yes, I'm all about learning and understanding secrets. Another person is like, they're learning about understanding, and they're just kind of the dreamer, and they're kind of just laissez-faire and whatever. And you've got the other one like, give me a bird, give me a toy. There's a bird. What am I doing? And the other one's like, throws a book at him, like, no, settle down. But you're still dogs. They're all dogs, and they still do dog things. And they have vices, so it's like if they fail a roll, a vice takes over, and they're like, "Ooh, what's that? What's that? Ooh, ice cream? Is that ice cream?" And so they're all in combat
That's
fighting, and
great.
the other one can't do anything because he found ice cream. So you get to play dogs. It's just really fun and really whimsical and really simple.
What's the name
And
again?
Devil's Dandy Dogs, the Devil's Dandy Dogs. And it's a
Fantastic.
fun
I
little
love it.
box set. And they use tarot cards. So, like, if you're a GM and you just want to fly by the seat of your pants and you don't want to pre-plan anything, they have cards. You put a card down and it'll give you whatever answer you want. It'll give you a number if you want. It'll give you a list of names.
That's
They have a
awesome.
book with the tarot card, and it just gives you whatever. So it's really fun and easy. I love it. I can't wait to play more of it.
There was
So that's the recent one.
that sounds amazing. The one that we did together where we all played like weird
Mechanical Corners.
mechanical corner. That was
Yeah.
amazing. That was
By
so
Fight in a
fun.
Box Games, and we're going to be doing that a couple more times here in the next couple of months. So you're
I'm in to
welcome.
be a donut cop. That was
Or
fantastic. Well, one of the I mentioned Monster of the Week, and because that was very rules light. It's 1d6. It's pass or
Mhm.
fail. So you have so it's a rule. Monster of the Week is kind of like Scooby-Doo,
Yeah, yeah, it's
where
very much Scooby Doo.
yeah, where
Also
you
a little bit like Kids on Bikes too is another game that's very similar
yes.
to that.
Yes, exactly so. So it's like Scooby-Doo where you play a character that has a really weird vice. So I played we did like a 1980s setting, so I played a 1980s metalhead who is actually chosen by Odin, and
Okay.
he knows that he is, but nobody else around him knows that he is. And so he beats enemies like by playing his guitar. So very brutal legend. And but he's like, "Whoa, I am the best." And so he goes around pretending that he's the best, and people go, "This guy is like mental. There's no way that he's actually chosen by Odin." But he actually is. And so anytime I would roll successfully, he would actually do the thing that he was meant to do by the power of his guitar. Odin, like a giant lightning speed, would come down and go zoom on his guitar. And so he was accidentally like a god, but he had no idea, and he just kind of flubbed into it. And so if you want to play something, and they're meant to be played in an hour. It's like a story. It's a story that's meant to be played about an hour and a half. Again, depending if you want to drag it out, you can. And I think it's genius because it's one sheet, it's 1d6, that's it. And so there's nothing else to do but look at what funny things your character, your vices, and just role play it. It's very simple. And I really think that, I mean, we could rules lawyer D&D all you want, but I really think, especially nowadays in the pre-COVID, well, pre-COVID, post-COVID, modern, I don't know where we are in COVID, in middle COVID, I don't know, we're COVID AD 5.
Post
That's where
COVID.
we, so in a post-COVID world where people don't have a lot of time anymore, I think that rules light stuff, or even things like I think one of the reasons why Baldur's Gate 3 did so well is even if you
Yeah,
haven't played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, is you can do a piece of a story. You can pause it and then you can come back to it later. And it is something that's solo as well, and you can control all the characters. And I mean, if you want to, you can play multiplayer and have other people
with other
control
players.
characters.
Yeah,
But because it is so diverse and so malleable, you can play the game however you want. And I
yeah,
think that that's something that modern TTRPGs are really good at, is playing the game however you want, especially little games like the ones we just mentioned, where
yeah.
there's a lot of choice and a lot of, so if you're like, I don't want to play a fantasy setting, you don't have to worry. There is a game for you. I
There's a
promise you.
game. Yeah, there is an RPG for everyone
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, will
that's
you
willing to
tell will
play
you
an
tell
RPG.
everybody what's coming up on Epic Realms and what RPGs are next?
So just on Monday, this last Monday, we had D&D legend Stephen Shend on, who wrote a ton of second edition D&D books, a lot of source books for Forgotten Realms.
Mhm.
He did the Blackstaff, Kelvin Blackstaff novels, and he took some time off from the RPG world, and he's recently returning, and he's got a lot of projects that he's working on. I know what they are, but we can't talk about them because he can't talk about them, so I'm not going to talk about them. But he's got a lot of projects coming out, including some stuff tied to some of the World of Warcraft guys that made a game called Ouroboros. He's working on stuff with them that's going to be coming out, and that did a Kickstarter in 2022. But yeah, we had him on. That aired the day that we are recording today. So anybody who is listening to this, whenever you're listening to this, can go ahead and get that. We have Brandon Crilly, who's an author and uh, game designer. He's going to be coming on down the road as well. So we don't have a ton of game designers on the list coming up. We have authors and other stuff as well coming up, and I'm still starting to schedule. So stay tuned for that on the Epic Realms podcast. And
I
of course, a
prefer.
ton of people we mentioned in the past are on there. Our backlog is 105 episodes, guys. 105 episodes of guests. You'll even if you don't know them, go and listen. They're lots of fun.
Ed Greenwood's been there. I know he has.
Ed's been there twice, three times. Ed is the has the most appearances. He's been there three times.
More than me?
Yes. I mean, technically, the podcast itself, you've only been there once.
I'm coming for you, Ed. I'm coming for your record.
There are people that are like fighting for those spots. Yeah, Ed Greenwood's been on there three times, twice solo. Once him and Andrew Valkauskas
That's right.
were on there together. Eric Scott DeBee has been there a couple times. Chris Jackson, author, but Eric Scott DeBee, obviously D&D
Steve
creator,
Jackson
writer.
was there. We know that.
Steve Jackson was there. Chris Jackson, yeah, Steve Jackson. Just all kinds of people. We just had Jeff Grubb on not too long ago. We
Hmm.
talked about the Elder Scrolls. We had Bruce Nesmith on as well. So he worked on a bunch of stuff. Bruce Nesmith, Jeff Grubb. Jeff Grubb currently working on the Elder Scrolls Online, but big D&D person. So if you like D&D, if you like tabletop role playing, if you like board games, we've had everybody all the major names on here. R.A. Salvador,
Bob. Yeah, that's right.
Bob, yeah, had
Yeah.
Bob on. And of course, one of the best we had on was this person, Michelle Franklin. I don't know where I'm going to be.
I'm on the phone.
You're on the bottom, so you're down below me here. That
Yeah.
person, Michelle. For me, you're right here. Michelle Franklin's obviously been on the show, lots of fun, and of course, since then we've done so much stuff together. And
Yeah, and I
anytime,
saw
anytime I'm like, hey, I got something that's going
yep.
on in 3 days. Are you available? And yeah, sure. Okay, let's do it.
As long as my schedule permits, I'm always there for Epic Realms. Nick, he always sends me messages going, "Do you want to talk about cryptids for 2 hours?" I go, "Yes, I do."
Yep. We talked
Amazing.
about cryptids. That was great.
Do you want to talk about werewolves for an hour? Yes, I do. Let's
Let's do
go.
it. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
absolutely. So actually, spooky season is almost upon us. So if
Yeah.
you want to do a werewolf special, I am more than happy to sit
You
here
don't
and
want to talk about how ancient aliens are real?
we did that plenty on our other program. Oh my God, Jesus Christ. HL, Jesus. Of course, yeah. Well, hold on. Wait. Nick, ready? Alien. There you go.
Now
Now we have to crop it.
we're gonna crop it. Inside joke. Do you want to tell people the inside joke?
The inside joke for those who don't know, I think it was what was it, the first or the second time I was on. We
The very
we
first time.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
and
very
so
first
I
time.
I had my hands up like this when it was the aliens thing. And so ever since I took a screen cap and put it up there. And then ever since then every time that Nick and I have done a program together, we've always found a place where I have lifted my hands and they're just aliens like
Or
that.
or or even like there were times where I've had a show with somebody else and you're like
Yes.
crop me and you like put it in there. It's like, oh, okay, fine. And then I come to watch Arceus, you and Arceus. I'm like, okay, here we go. Here's you doing the aliens thing too. And that's just been an ongoing joke between the two of us sharing us doing the aliens pose.
And now I have to do another one. And so I will actually for the thumbnail of this. For the thumbnail of this. Uh, Nick, thank you so much for being here, and we'll have you back again. We will talk about the history, certainly of other nerdy things, and we'll have you back because now that I've been on your show 4 times and you've been here once, you have to be here 3 other times so you can even it
Oh,
out.
it's a one-upmanship now. Okay, I see.
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, I know this is an academic podcast, but still, we don't care about grades
I know some
sometimes.
things. I know some things.